The first bullet cracked through the canopy 3 feet above Sergeant First Class Linnea Vashon's head, and before the sound finished echoing through the valley, the jungle erupted into chaos. She was already diving behind a fallen mahogany trunk when the second and third round snapped past, close enough that she felt the pressure change against her cheek. Somewhere to her left, Specialist Odia was screaming about contact, his voice high and breaking. Somewhere ahead, Master Sergeant Brannigan was bellowing for a report that nobody could give him because nobody knew where the fire was coming from. Linnea knew. She pressed her eye to the scope of her M110, scanning the ridge line 800 meters to the northeast. The jungle canopy was thick up there, a wall of green that could hide a battalion, but she had spent her childhood hunting elk in the Montana wilderness with her father, and elk did not want to be found either. Movement. A shadow that did not belong. The barely visible glint of glass catching filtered sunlight. 847 meters. Elevation plus 6 degrés. Wind negligible in the valley, but gusting at altitude, maybe 4 miles per hour from the east. She adjusted her scope. Contact. Ridge line. 847 meters. She called into her radio. I have the shooter. Brannigan's voice came back immediately, hard and dismissive. Hold position, Vashon, Volkov, Kerrigan, suppressive fire on that ridge. Everyone else, bound back to cover. She had the shot. Her finger rested on the trigger guard, not the trigger itself, because discipline was everything, and discipline meant following orders even when those orders were wrong. The crosshairs settled on the shadow between two rocks. One squeeze, and this ambush would lose its teeth. Hold position, Brannigan repeated, as if he could sense her hesitation through the radio. The men will handle this. The men. She had heard that phrase 17 times since joining ODA 72-15 3 weeks ago. The men will take point. The men will handle the heavy lifting. The men will clear the compound while you watch the gear. Before we continue with what happened next, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you are watching from. Maybe you have served alongside someone whose skills were overlooked because of who they were rather than what they could do. The suppressive fire began, Volkov's machine gun chattering in controlled bursts, Kerrigan's rifle barking alongside it. The ridge line disappeared behind a curtain of shredded vegetation and rock dust. When the firing stopped, Linnea scanned again. The shadow was gone. The shooter had vanished. Damn it, Brannigan growled. He is gone. Kerrigan, status. Kerrigan's response came back strained, pain evident beneath the professionalism. Hit. Left side. Through and through, I think. Bleeding pretty good. Linnea was already moving before she processed the decision. She covered the 30 meters to Kerrigan's position in seconds, staying low, using the terrain the way her father had taught her when they tracked wounded animals through the backcountry. Kerrigan was propped against a tree, his hand pressed to his ribs, blood seeping between his fingers. I told you to hold position, Brannigan's voice crackled. She ignored him, pulling out her individual first aid kit. The wound was ugly but survivable, the round having punched through the soft tissue below his armpit and exited cleanly. She packed the entry and exit wounds, applied pressure, secured the bandage with quick, efficient movements. You're going to be fine, she told him. Kerrigan managed a weak grin through the pain. Better bedside manner than Brannigan, at least. The rest of the team consolidated around them, while Volkov maintained security on the ridge. Captain Aldridge, the detachment commander, coordinated a casualty evacuation request while Brannigan stalked the perimeter like a caged predator denied his prey. 3 wounded. Kerrigan the worst, but 2 others had caught fragments from rounds striking nearby rocks. An ambush that had materialized from nowhere, struck with precision, and dissolved before they could respond effectively. Linnea studied the ridge line through her scope while the team worked. The position the shooter had used was nearly perfect, elevated, concealed, with a clear view of the trail they had been following. Whoever had pulled that trigger knew exactly where to wait and exactly when to shoot. This was not a chance contact. This was a planned attack. She swept her scope across the surrounding terrain, cataloging potential positions, escape routes, secondary ambush sites. The valley funneled toward a narrow pass 2 kilometers ahead, and the ridge lines on either side offered dozens of locations where a patient shooter could wait. Helicopter is 40 minutes out, Aldridge announced. Weather is marginal, but they're going to try. Brannigan gathered the team with a gesture. We moved to Compound Zura, he said, naming the abandoned village they had designated as their patrol base. Defensive posture until extraction. What about the shooter? Volkov asked. Gone, Brannigan said. We will report it and let intelligence figure out who is operating in this valley. Linnea lowered her scope. I can tell you who is operating in this valley. Every head turned toward her. Brannigan's eyes narrowed. She pointed toward the ridge. That position was prepared in advance. The shooter knew our route, knew our timing, and engaged from a range that most insurgent fighters could not even attempt. Whoever took those shots has training. Brannigan's jaw tightened. We will include that in the report. This was not random contact, she pressed. This was targeted. I said we will include it in the report. Brannigan's voice carried the finality of a cell door closing. Now pack up. We are moving. She wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that 3 weeks of being sidelined had not made her blind, that she could read terrain and tactics as well as any operator in this valley, that whoever had ambushed them was still out there and would be waiting when they moved again. But discipline meant following orders, even the wrong ones. She helped Kerrigan to his feet, taking some of his weight as the team began its movement toward Compound Zura. The jungle pressed close around them, every shadow potentially hiding the barrel of a rifle. As they walked, she replayed the engagement in her mind. The angle of fire, the precision of shots, the calculated withdrawal before return fire could be effective. Somewhere on that ridge, a ghost had revealed itself just long enough to draw blood. And Linnea knew with absolute certainty that he would reveal himself again. The question was whether anyone would listen to her before he did. Compound Zura had been a village once, before the war had driven its inhabitants into the refugee camps across the Pakistani border. Now it was a collection of crumbling mud walls and empty doorways, occupied by 12 American soldiers who had turned its largest structure into a temporary command post. Linnea sat on an overturned crate near the entrance, her rifle across her knees, watching the tree line while the team settled into defensive positions. The helicopter had come and gone, taking Kerrigan and the 2 other wounded back to Forward Operating Base Bostic. The weather was deteriorating, clouds rolling down from the mountain peaks, which meant no further air support until morning at the earliest. They were alone out here, 12 operators in hostile territory with a shooter who knew their movements. Brannigan called a team meeting in the main structure as the last light faded from sky. Linnea took her place at the back of the room, leaning against the doorframe where she could watch both the briefing and the approaches to the compound. Mission continues at 0400, Brannigan announced. We push through to Checkpoint Whiskey, link up with the Afghan National Army Patrol, and complete the reconnaissance of the valley before extraction tomorrow evening. Captain Aldridge nodded from his position near the map table. Hire wants eyes on the cave complexes along the border. Intelligence suggests weapons caching. And the shooter, Volkov asked. Brannigan's expression did not change. One hostile with a rifle does not change our operational parameters. We adjust our movement techniques and continue the mission. Linnea felt the words forming before she could stop them. It was not just one hostile with a rifle. The room went quiet. Brannigan turned toward her slowly, the way a man turns toward an irritation he has been trying to ignore. You have something to add, Sergeant. It was not a question. It was a warning. She pushed off from the doorframe and stepped into the room. The shot that hit Kerrigan came from 847 meters. The follow-up shots were within a 3-inch grouping at that range. That is not an insurgent with an old Mosin Nagant. That is a trained sniper with quality optics and match-grade ammunition. Your point, Brannigan said. My point is that we're being hunted by a professional. And if we move through that valley tomorrow using standard movement techniques, he is going to be waiting for us in a position we cannot see until it is too late. Volkov shifted his weight, interest visible on his face. Aldridge studied the map with renewed attention. But Brannigan's expression remained fixed. Recommendations for our route and tactics are my responsibility, Sergeant Vashon. Your responsibility is to follow orders and provide rear security as assigned. The dismissal landed like a slap, but Linnea held his gaze. I am the only trained sniper in this element. If you want to counter a sniper threat, you need to use me in that role. What I need, Brannigan said, his voice dropping into something cold and final, is for every member of this team to execute their assigned duties without questioning my tactical decisions. You were attached to this ODA as an additional asset. That does not make you an operator. That does not make you special forces. And it does not give you the standing to tell me how to run my team. The silence that followed was absolute. Linnea felt the heat rising in her chest, the familiar burn of being dismissed, of being reduced to something less than what she was. She had felt it in basic training when her drill sergeant told her women did not belong in combat arms. She had felt it at sniper school when 3 instructors tried to wash her out on technicalities. She had felt it every day for the past 3 weeks on this deployment. But she had also learned that arguing accomplished nothing. Only results mattered. Understood, Master Sergeant, she said, and returned to her position at the door. The briefing continued without her input. Movement order, communications plan, contingencies that assumed they were facing a conventional threat rather than a predator who had already demonstrated the ability to strike without warning. When the meeting ended, she walked to the far corner of the compound where her gear was staged. The night was fully dark now, clouds obscuring the stars. The jungle sounds muted in a way that felt wrong. She sat with her back against the wall and pulled the chain from beneath her body armor. 2 dog tags hung from it. One was hers. The other bore a different name. Specialist Marcus Vashon, her younger brother, 3 years dead in a valley not so different from this one. He had joined the army because of her, had requested deployment to Afghanistan because she had made it sound like purpose, like meaning, like the thing that could transform an aimless kid from Montana into someone who mattered. And he had died in an ambush almost exactly like the one they had walked into today. She closed her fingers around the tags and let the metal warm against her palm. I'm not here to prove anything, she whispered to him, to herself, to the darkness. I am here to make sure it does not happen again. Not anyone else. Footsteps approached. She tucked the tags back beneath her armor and looked up to find Volkov standing a few meters away, his bulk outlined against the dim light from the command post. The shooter, he said without preamble. You really think he is that good? I think he knew exactly where we would be and exactly when we would be there, she replied. I think he chose a position that gave him maximum range advantage and minimum exposure. I think he engaged at a distance that most of our team cannot effectively return fire. And I think he withdrew the moment we started suppressing because he knew he had already accomplished his objective. Which was what? To hurt us. To slow us down. To make us afraid of what we cannot see. She paused. And to test our response, so he knows how to hit us harder next time. Volkov was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once and walked back toward the command post without another word. Linnea watched him go. It was not an alliance. It was not even agreement. But it was something. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission. She heard Aldridge's voice responding, then a rapid exchange in Pashto as their interpreter joined the conversation. When it ended, Aldridge emerged from the command post with an expression that made her stand. Intelligence update, he announced to the team. The shooter has been identified. Brannigan appeared behind him. Who? Aldridge consulted his notes. Karim Nazari, former Iranian Revolutionary Guard, now freelance, operating in this region for approximately 8 months. Confirmed kills include 7 American service members across 3 separate engagements. Linnea felt the cold settle into her chest. He is known to intelligence assets as the Ghost, Aldridge continued. No unit has successfully engaged him. He selects his targets, strikes, and disappears before response forces can be organized. The compound fell silent. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls, in a jungle that pressed close on every side, a man who had killed 7 Americans was preparing for another hunt. And their route for tomorrow was already compromised. The radio crackled again. This time the interpreter's face went pale as he listened. "They're talking about us," he said, "on open frequencies. They know our call signs. They know we lost men today." He looked up at Brannigan, then at Aldridge, then at the rest of the team waiting in the darkness. "They know exactly where we're going tomorrow." The mission brief began at 0300, an hour before movement. Linnea stood at the back of the room again, watching Brannigan trace their route on the laminated map with a red grease pencil. "Same plan," he said. "We move through the valley, maintain tactical spacing, reach checkpoint Whiskey by 0900. The Afghan National Army element will meet us there." Aldridge shifted his weight. "Given the intelligence about our route being compromised, should we consider an alternate approach?" Brannigan shook his head. "The alternates add 6 hours to our movement and take us through terrain we have not scouted. We will be trading a known threat for unknown threats." We push through as planned, but we adjust our formation. Tighter intervals, more security halts, eyes on the ridge lines at all times. Linnea bit down on the inside of her cheek to keep from speaking. Tighter intervals meant a better target. More security halts meant more time exposed in the kill zone. Eyes on the ridge lines meant nothing if the ghost chose a position they could not observe. "Vashon," Brannigan continued, "you are in the center of the formation, between Volkov and Oduya. The center, the most protected position, the place where a sniper was absolutely useless." She felt Volkov glance at her, but kept her expression neutral. "Understood, Master Sergeant." The team geared up in silence. Linnea checked her rifle 3 times, verified her scope 0 against a reference point on the compound wall, and loaded 5 magazines with 20 rounds each. Her sidearm carried 15 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. Her knife was sharp. Her first aid kit was stocked. None of it would matter if Brannigan kept her buried in the middle of the formation where she could not see, could not shoot, could not do the one thing she had trained her entire life to do. They moved out at 0400, slipping through the compound gate into darkness, so complete that Linnea could barely see the soldier 5 meters ahead of her. The night vision goggles helped, turning the world into shades of green and gray, but they also flattened depth perception and narrowed her field of view. The jungle swallowed them within minutes. Vegetation pressed close on both sides, leaves brushing against her arms and face, roots threatening to catch her boots with every step. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of decay. Oduya moved ahead of her, his steps careful but still too loud. He was the newest member of the ODA, only 6 months out of the qualification course, and his nerves showed in the tension of his shoulders and the way his head swiveled constantly. She closed the gap between them and touched his arm. He flinched. "Breathe," she whispered. "Slow your scan. Pick 3 points and rotate between them. Left ridge, right ridge, trail ahead. Repeat." He nodded, his movement jerky. "And watch the trees," she added. "Not just the ground. You'll be high." Oduya swallowed audibly. "You think he's out there right now?" "I know he is." They continued moving. The valley floor began to slope upward as they approached the narrow pass that had concerned Linnea during her map study. The ridge lines on either side grew steeper, the vegetation thinner. Good terrain for an ambush. Perfect terrain for a sniper. She watched the high ground through her night vision, searching for any irregularity in the tree line, any shadow that did not belong. The ghost was out there. She could feel it the way she used to feel the presence of predators in the Montana backcountry. A pressure in the air, a wrongness that preceded violence. "Security halt," Brannigan's voice came through the radio. "Take a knee." The formation stopped. Linnea dropped to one knee and raised her rifle, scanning the ridge to the east. Through her scope, the darkness resolved into detail. Rocks, trees, a fallen log that could provide concealment, a cluster of boulders that would offer an excellent shooting position. Movement. She froze, her crosshairs settling on the spot. For 3 heartbeats, she held her breath, waiting, watching. Then a bird burst from the undergrowth and winged away into the darkness. She exhaled slowly. "Moving," Brannigan announced, and the formation lurched forward again. The pass narrowed. The walls of the valley rose on either side like the jaws of a trap preparing to close. Linnea felt her pulse quicken despite years of training designed to keep it steady. This is wrong, she thought. Everything about this is wrong. She keyed her radio before she could stop herself. Vashon to lead. I have concerns about the terrain ahead. Brannigan's response was immediate. Hold traffic for tactical use only. Master Sergeant, if we continue into this pass without overwatch on the high ground, we are walking into a kill zone. I said hold traffic. The radio went silent. Linnea stared at the back of Odia's head, frustration boiling in her chest. 20 meters ahead, the pass opened into a small clearing before the trail continued up the slope. A perfect engagement area. Multiple positions with overlapping fields of fire. No cover for anyone caught in the open. She made a decision. Instead of following the formation into the clearing, she angled left, moving up the slope toward a cluster of rocks that would give her a view of both the clearing and the ridge line beyond. It was a violation of her orders. It was also the only way she could provide any protection for the team. She reached the rocks and dropped prone, settling her rifle into a stable shooting position. Through her scope, she watched the team enter the clearing. And then she saw him. For 100 meters up the eastern ridge, a prone figure lay behind a natural rock formation. The long barrel of a precision rifle extended from the shadows, tracking the movement of the Americans below. He was perfectly positioned, perfectly concealed, perfectly patient. The ghost. Linnea placed her crosshairs on his center mass. The range was manageable. The angle was difficult, but not impossible. She had made harder shots in training. Her finger moved to the trigger. Then his rifle shifted, the barrel swinging away from the team in the clearing, searching for something else. Searching for her. He had spotted her movement up the slope. He knew she was there. And now it was not a question of who would shoot first. It was a question of who would find their target in the darkness before the other one did. A single shot cracked through the valley. It was not hers. The round struck the rock 3 inches from Linnea's face, spraying fragments of stone across her cheek. She rolled left without thinking, muscle memory taking over, and came up behind a larger boulder as a second shot cracked through the space she had just occupied. He had found her first. In the clearing below, chaos erupted. The ghost's initial shot had been a signal, and now the valley came alive with gunfire from multiple positions. Muzzle flashes sparked along both ridge lines as insurgent fighters opened up on the pinned American formation. Linnea pressed herself against the boulder and forced her breathing to slow. Panic was death. Panic was how soldiers made mistakes that got themselves and their teammates killed. She had 3 seconds to assess, 3 seconds to decide, 3 seconds before the ghost repositioned for a killing shot. She chose to move. Rolling out from the opposite side of the boulder, she sprinted 5 meters to a shallow depression in the slope and threw herself flat. A round snapped past her head, close enough that she felt the pressure wave against her ear. He was tracking her, adjusting, learning her movement patterns. But she was learning his too. In the clearing, Oduya was down. She could see him through the chaos, lying exposed in the open ground, his hand pressed to his thigh where dark blood was spreading across his uniform. Volkov was trying to reach him, moving in short rushes between bursts of covering fire, but the volume of incoming rounds made every meter a gamble. Linnea raised her rifle and found the nearest muzzle flash on the western ridge. 623 meters. A fighter with a PKM machine gun, raking the clearing with sustained fire. She exhaled half a breath, held, and squeezed. The machine gun went silent. She was moving before the body fell, relocating to a new position 10 meters up the slope. The ghost would have seen her muzzle flash. He would be adjusting. She had bought herself maybe 4 seconds. Through her scope, she swept the eastern ridge, searching for his position. The rocks where she had first spotted him were empty now. He had relocated the moment the ambush began, trading his prepared position for mobility. Smart. Professional. Exactly what she would have done. Brannigan's voice cut through the radio chaos. All elements, break contact south. Bound by teams. It was the right call. Staying in the kill zone meant dying in the kill zone. But breaking contact meant moving through open ground, while fighters on both ridges poured fire into their path. Linnea keyed her radio. Vashon has Overwatch. I can cover your movement. For a long moment, there was no response. Then Brannigan's voice came back, strained with the effort of command under fire. Do it. She settled into her position and began to work. The western ridge first. 3 fighters visible, 2 with rifles, and 1 reloading the PKM she had silenced. She took the machine gunner first, then the rifleman on the left, then the one on the right. 3 shots, 3 kills, each round placed with the precision that had made her the top graduate of her sniper class. Volkov reached Oduya and hauled him upright, dragging him toward cover while the younger soldiers screamed in pain. Linnea shifted her aim to the eastern ridge, searching for targets, searching for the ghost. A muzzle flash, 400 meters, partially concealed behind a fallen tree. She fired and saw bark explode from the trunk, but the shooter had already moved. Not the ghost. His movements were too clumsy, too predictable. The team was moving now, bounding south in pairs while those in cover provided suppressive fire. It was ugly and desperate, but it was working. The initial shock of the ambush was wearing off, replaced by the grim professionalism of soldiers who had trained for exactly this kind of hell. Linnea continued to call out targets, her rifle barking in steady rhythm. Each shot bought another second of movement, another meter of progress towards safety. She tracked her kills without emotion. 7, 8, 9. Fighters who had chosen to attack American soldiers and paid the price for that choice. But where was the ghost? She swept the eastern ridge again, searching for his distinctive profile, the long barrel of his precision rifle. Nothing. He had vanished into the terrain like smoke dissolving in wind. Then she understood. He was not on the ridge anymore. He was moving, repositioning for a shot that would matter. And the only target worth repositioning for was the one providing overwatch for the American retreat. Her. She rolled, left a half second before the round punched through the space where her head had been. The crack of the shot reached her ears as she tumbled down the slope, rocks and roots tearing at her uniform. Her rifle clutched against her chest. She hit a tree trunk hard enough to drive the breath from her lungs and lay gasping in the underbrush while another round snapped through the branches above her. He had closed the distance. 300 meters now, maybe less. Close enough that her concealment in the vegetation was meaningless to a shooter of his caliber. The team was still moving below, still taking fire from the remaining fighters on the ridges. They needed her covering fire. Without it, the withdrawal would stall and the casualty count would climb. Linnea forced herself upright, ignoring the pain in her ribs where she had struck the tree. She could not see the ghost, but she knew approximately where he was. That would have to be enough. She fired 3 rounds into the area where his last shot had originated, not expecting to hit him, but hoping to force him into cover. Then she was moving again, sprinting across the slope, zigging when instinct told her to zag. A round crack passed, then another. He was tracking her, but she was not giving him a stable target. She reached a cluster of boulders and threw herself behind them, chest heaving, sweat stinging her eyes. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see the team reaching the southern edge of the clearing. They were almost out of the kill zone. Her radio crackled. Vashon status. It was Volkov, not Brannigan. Still breathing, she replied. The sniper is on me. 300 meters east, moving south. He's trying to cut off your withdrawal. Can you hold him? She checked her magazine. 12 rounds remaining. Her shoulder ached where she had landed on it. Her cheek was bleeding from the rock fragments. And somewhere in the jungle, a professional killer was hunting her with patient, methodical precision. I can hold him, she said. Through her scope, she caught movement. A shadow flowing between trees, smooth and controlled, closing the distance with every passing second. The ghost was coming for her, and she was exactly where she needed to be. Linnea pressed herself flat against the boulder and became stone. This was the discipline her father had taught her in the Montana wilderness, the ability to slow her heartbeat through force of will, to control her breathing until it was nearly imperceptible, to transform herself into part of the landscape. She had once remained motionless for 6 hours while a wounded grizzly searched for the hunter who had put a round through its shoulder. The bear had passed within 10 feet of her position and never knew she was there. The ghost was more dangerous than any bear. She watched through a crack in the rocks as he moved through the jungle, a shadow among shadows. He was good, better than anyone she had ever observed through a scope. His movements were fluid and economical, never exposing more of his body than necessary, never remaining in one position long enough to present a target. But he was hunting, and hunting required movement. Stillness was her advantage. The team had reached the southern tree line. She could hear scattered gunfire as they engaged the remaining fighters, but the intensity was diminishing. The ambush was breaking apart, the surviving insurgents melting back into the jungle now that their prey had escaped the kill zone. All except the ghost. He stopped 30 meters from her position, rifle raised, scanning the terrain. She could see his face through her scope now. Dark eyes beneath a worn paycall hat. A beard streaked with gray. The weathered features of a man who had spent decades in wars across multiple continents. He was looking for her. She could see the calculation in his movements, the way he processed the terrain, eliminating possible positions one by one. He knew she was close. He just did not know exactly where. Linnea placed her crosshairs on his chest. 30 meters. At this range, she could put a round through his heart before he registered the muzzle flash. One squeeze, and the ghost would haunt no one ever again. Her finger moved to the trigger. Then he spoke. "I know you were here," he said in accented English. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "You are good, better than the others. But you cannot hide forever." She did not move, did not breathe. He began walking again, a slow circuit around her position. 25 meters now. Then 20. He was probing, trying to flush her out, trying to force a reaction that would betray her location. "The Americans you killed today," he continued, "they're not the first. They will not be the last. This valley has swallowed soldiers for 40 years. Soviet, American, it makes no difference. The mountains do not care about flags." 15 meters. Linnea felt sweat sliding down her temple. Her finger rested on the trigger, but the angle was wrong now. He had moved behind a tree, only his shoulder visible. She could wound him, but a wounded ghost was still a ghost. "You fight well," he said, for a woman. The words should have made her angry. Instead, they made her cold, focused. He was trying to provoke a response, and his choice of provocation told her something important. He knew she was female. He had seen her during the ambush, identified her, and remembered her, which meant he considered her a threat worth tracking, worth hunting, worth speaking to in the moments before the kill. She adjusted her grip on the rifle and waited. 10 meters. He stepped out from behind the tree, rifle sweeping in a slow arc. His eyes passed over her position without stopping. She was invisible among the rocks, her uniform blending with the gray stone, her stillness making her part of the mountain itself. Then his radio crackled. The transmission was in Farsi, too fast and garbled for Linnea to follow, but she saw his expression change. Annoyance flickered across his features, followed by something that might have been resignation. He replied in clipped syllables, then lowered his rifle. Another time, he said to the jungle around him, "We will finish this another time." He turned and began moving east, back toward the ridge line, disappearing into the vegetation with the same fluid grace that had marked his approach. Linnea remained motionless for a full minute after he vanished. Then another minute. Then a third. Only when she was certain he was gone did she allow herself to breathe normally again. Her hands were shaking. She had not noticed until now. She keyed her radio. "Vashin to any element. The sniper has withdrawn east. I am moving to your position." Volkov's voice came back immediately. "Copy. We are holding at the tree line. Brannigan is hit." The word struck her like a physical blow. "How bad?" "Leg wound. Bleeding controlled, but he cannot walk. We need to get him to cover and wait for extraction." She was already moving, working her way down the slope toward the team's position. The jungle had gone quiet, the last echoes of gunfire fading into the distance. Birds were beginning to call again. the first sign that the immediate danger had passed. But the danger had not passed. It had only retreated. She found the team clustered in a defensive perimeter at the edge of the tree line. Brannigan lay propped against a fallen log, his face gray with pain and blood loss, while one of the medics worked on the wound in his thigh. Oduya sat nearby, his own leg bandaged, his expression shell-shocked. Aldridge looked up as she approached. "You held him off." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "He withdrew. I do not know why." "Because you made him work for it," Volkov said. He was standing at the perimeter, rifle ready, eyes on the jungle. He expected easy prey. "You showed him we are not easy." Brannigan's eyes opened, unfocused and glazed. "Vashin." She moved to his side and knelt. "I am here, Master Sergeant." He reached up and grabbed her arm with surprising strength. His mouth worked for a moment before the words came. "The shooter. You saw him." "Yes. Can you find him again?" She looked at the wounded around her. At Oduya, who had nearly died in that clearing. At Brannigan himself, brought low by the same arrogance that had dismissed her skills for 3 weeks. "Yes," she said. "I can find him." Brannigan's grip tightened, then released. His eyes closed, and his head fell back against the log. She stood and looked at Volkov. "We need to move. He knows where we are. He'll be back." Volkov nodded. "Then we need to be somewhere else when he comes." Through the canopy above, the first gray light of dawn was beginning to filter through. Somewhere to the east, the Ghost was regrouping, planning, preparing for the next engagement. And Linnea was already thinking about how to kill him. They moved Brannigan on a makeshift stretcher cut from branches and ponchos, for soldiers rotating the carry while the others maintained security. The pace was agonizingly slow, every step a potential trigger for another ambush, every shadow a possible hiding place for the Ghost. Linnea walked point. No one had ordered her there. No one had questioned it either. The dynamics of the team had shifted in the blood and chaos of the clearing, authority flowing toward competence the way water flows downhill. Brannigan was unconscious more often than not, his body fighting the blood loss, his command dissolving with every labored breath. Aldridge moved beside her as they navigated a narrow ravine. "You saved us back there." "I did my job," she replied without taking her eyes off the terrain ahead. "No." He shook his head. "You did what Brannigan should have let you do from the start. If you had been in a proper overwatch position before the ambush, we might have seen them coming." She did not respond. There was nothing to say. The what-ifs of combat were endless and pointless. The only thing that mattered was what happened next. They reached a small plateau as the sun climbed toward noon. A cluster of ruins offered some cover, the remnants of a shepherd's hut that had been abandoned long before the current war. Aldridge called a halt, and the team collapsed into defensive positions while the medic checked on the wounded. Linnea climbed to the highest point of the ruins, a crumbling wall that gave her a view of the approaches from 3 directions. She settled into a prone position and began scanning with her scope. The Ghost was out there. She could feel it. Volkov climbed up to join her a few minutes later, staying low to avoid skylining himself. "Found something," he said, "on one of the dead fighters from the ambush." He held out a handheld radio, its casing cracked, but the electronics still functional. Linnea took it and examined the frequency settings. "Same encryption as the Afghan National Army units we were supposed to link up with," Volkov said. His expression was grim. "Our route was not compromised by signals intelligence. It was compromised by someone with access to ANA communications." She felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. The ambush at the clearing, the precise timing of the attack, the knowledge of their call signs and movements. It all pointed to one conclusion. "We have a leak," she said. Volkov nodded. "Someone in the ANA element we were supposed to meet is feeding information to the enemy." The implications settled over her like a weight. Their extraction coordinates, their rally points, every piece of operational information they had shared with their supposed allies was potentially compromised. The Ghost had not just stumbled across their patrol. He had been handed their location on a silver platter. "Does Aldridge know?" "I'm telling him next." Volkov paused. "But I wanted you to know first. You are the one who is going to have to deal with the consequences." She understood what he meant. If the ANA element was compromised, then Checkpoint Whiskey was not a rally point. It was a trap. And if the extraction coordinates had been shared with the ANA, then the helicopters would be flying into an ambush of their own. We need to change everything, she said. New extraction point. New route. Complete communications blackout with the ANA. That means operating blind in hostile territory with wounded that cannot move fast and a sniper who already knows we are here. Linnea lowered her scope and met his eyes. Then we stopped running. We turned this around. Volkov studied her for a long moment. What do you have in mind? The ghost expects us to keep moving toward extraction. He will position himself along our likely routes, wait for us to walk into his sights. She gestured toward the jungle spread out below them. But what if we do not move? What if we let him come to us? Set a trap for the trapper. He has been hunting Americans for 8 months. 7 confirmed kills. He is confident, probably arrogant. She remembered the way he had spoken to her in the jungle, the casual certainty in his voice. That confidence is a weakness. He believes he is the predator here. We need to show him he is wrong. Volkov was quiet for a moment. Then a thin smile crossed his face. I will talk to Aldrich. But Vashin, if we do this, you need to understand something. She waited. You are not just the shooter anymore. You are the mission. Everything we do from this point forward is about putting you in position to take him down. That means the team protects you. It means we follow your tactical recommendations. It means Brannigan's approach is finished. The weight of it settled onto her shoulders. 11 lives, depending on her ability to outthink and outshoot a man who had been killing soldiers since before she enlisted. I understand, she said. Volkov nodded and slid back down from the wall to brief Aldrich. Linnea returned to her scope, scanning the tree lines, the ridges, the shadows where death might be waiting. The ghost was out there, planning his next move, confident that his prey would continue to behave like prey. He did not know that the rules had changed. She reached beneath her body armor and touched the dog tags hanging against her chest. Marcus had died in a valley like this one, killed by an enemy he never saw coming. She had carried that weight for 3 years, the guilt of being the reason he joined, the fury at the randomness of his death. But this was not random. This was a man with a name and a face and a pattern of behavior she could learn. This was an enemy she could find, fix, and finish. The radio Volkov had given her crackled with distant chatter. She listened to the Farsi voices, picking out words she recognized from her pre-deployment training. Coordinates, timing, movement. They were planning another attack. But this time, she would be ready. She keyed her team radio and spoke the words that would change everything. Vashin to Aldrich. I know where he's going to be, and I know how to kill him. The plan was simple in concept and brutal in execution. Linnea gathered the able-bodied members of the team in the ruins while Odia and Brannigan rested under the medic's care. She drew in the dirt with a stick, sketching terrain features from memory. The ghost uses prepared positions, she explained. He scouts his kill zones in advance, identifies multiple firing points, and rotates between them based on target movement. That is how he has survived this long. He is never where you expect him to be. Aldrich studied the crude map. So how do we predict where he will be? We do not predict. We dictate. She drew a line from their current position toward a ridge to the northeast. He expects us to move toward extraction. Every logical route takes us through terrain that favors a sniper. Open valleys, narrow passes, exposed slopes. He will be waiting along one of those routes. And if we do not take those routes, Volkov asked, then he has to come to us. She tapped the ruins where they sat. This position is defensible. Good sight lines, solid cover, multiple fallback points. If we stay here and make him think we are too wounded to move, he will have to close the distance to finish the job. You want to use us as bait, one of the other soldiers said. His name was Harmon, a staff sergeant with 10 years in special forces. I want to use me as bait, Linnea corrected. You hold this position and make noise. I will be out there, waiting for him to expose himself. The team exchanged glances. She could see the doubt on some faces, the calculation on others. These were men who had spent their careers operating as a unit, trusting each other with their lives, trusting an outsider A woman who had been with them for only 3 weeks was a different matter entirely. Aldridge spoke first. "What do you need from us?" "Periodic movement. Radio chatter on our frequencies. Nothing classified. Just enough to make it sound like we're planning to move at dawn. Fire discipline if you spot targets, but no engagement unless directly threatened." She paused. "And someone to watch the northern approach. That is the most likely avenue for his attack." Volkov nodded. "I will take north." Harmon volunteered for the eastern sector. 2 other soldiers divided the remaining approaches. Within minutes, the defensive plan was set. Linnea checked her rifle one final time, verified her ammunition count, and prepared to move out. "Vashon." She turned. Aldridge was standing behind her, his expression unreadable. "If this does not work," he said quietly, "we are all dead. You understand that?" "Yes." "And you still think it is the right call?" She thought about the alternative. Moving through hostile terrain with wounded soldiers, hunted by a sniper who knew their every move. Reaching an extraction point that might be compromised, boarding helicopters that might be flying into an ambush. "I think it is the only call," she said. Aldridge held her gaze for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Good hunting." She shook it and slipped into the gathering darkness. The jungle swallowed her within seconds. She moved slowly, deliberately, placing each foot with care to avoid snapping branches or disturbing loose stones. The night vision goggles turned the world green and gray, flattening the terrain into a maze of shadows. She had chosen her position during the afternoon, a rocky outcropping 200 meters from the ruins that offered a clear view of the northern and eastern approaches. It was not an obvious sniper hide, which was exactly why she had selected it. The ghost would be looking for elevated positions, overwatch points, the kinds of places a trained sniper would naturally gravitate toward. She was betting he would overlook a pile of rocks that looked more like debris than cover. The wait began. Hours passed. The jungle sounds rose and fell around her. Insects humming, night birds calling, the distant rustle of animals moving through the underbrush. She remained motionless, her rifle positioned, her breathing slow and steady. In the ruins, the team played their part. Flashlights moved behind the walls. Voices carried on the night air, carefully calibrated to sound like soldiers planning their next move. Radio transmissions crackled with false coordinates and invented timelines. The bait was set. Now she needed the predator to take it. Midnight came and went. Her muscles ached from the sustained stillness. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope. Doubt crept in at the edges of her mind, whispering that the ghost was too smart, too experienced, too patient to fall for such an obvious trap. Then she saw him, a shadow detaching from the tree line to the northeast, moving low and fast, using the terrain with the fluid grace she had observed before. He was approaching the ruins from an angle that would put him in position to observe without being observed, exactly as she had predicted. She tracked him through her scope, watching as he settled into a prone position behind a fallen log. 300 meters from her location. An easy shot under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. If she fired now, she might wound him, but his position offered too much cover for a guaranteed kill. He would return fire, and in the darkness, with the team concentrated in the ruins, the result would be chaos. She needed him to move. She needed him closer. The radio in her pocket vibrated silently. Volkov's voice came through her earpiece. "I have movement, north side. Single figure, 300 meters. She keyed her mic twice in acknowledgement, the clicks barely audible. The ghost remained in his position, watching the ruins. She could see the glint of his scope, the patient set of his shoulders. He was reading the situation, calculating angles, planning his approach. Then he moved, not toward the ruins, toward her. Her heart rate spiked before training clamped down on the response. He had spotted something, a glint of moonlight on her scope, a shape that did not belong among the rocks. Some instinct honed by decades of war had told him that the real threat was not in the ruins. She had 2 choices: stay still and hope his suspicion was general rather than specific, or reposition and risk exposing herself completely. She chose stillness. The ghost advanced in short rushes, pausing between movements to scan and listen. 250 meters. 200. 175. Close enough. Linnea exhaled, held, and squeezed the trigger. The round caught the ghost in the left shoulder, spinning him sideways as he dove for cover. She saw the spray of blood in her scope, dark against the green of her night vision. And then he was gone, rolling behind a boulder with a speed that should have been impossible for a man who had just taken a rifle round. Wounded, but not dead. She was moving before the echo of her shot faded, scrambling from her position as his return fire cracked through the space she had just occupied. 2 rounds, precisely placed, punching into the rocks where her head had been a half-second earlier. Even wounded, even surprised, he was still deadly. The jungle erupted with noise. In the ruins, the team opened fire toward the ghost position, laying down suppressive rounds to cover her movement. Tracers streaked through the darkness, illuminating the terrain in brief flashes of orange and red. Linnea sprinted 20 meters and threw herself behind a tree trunk, gasping for breath. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She had hit him. First blood was hers. But first blood meant nothing if he was still breathing. She keyed her radio. Target wounded, moving east. I am in pursuit. Volkov's response was immediate. Copy. We are displacing to secondary positions. Do not let him circle back. She pushed off from the tree and began tracking. The blood trail was visible even in the darkness, black droplets on leaves and stones that led eastward through the undergrowth. He was moving fast despite the wound, driven by the same survival instinct that had kept him alive through decades of war. The jungle closed around her as she followed the trail. Every shadow was a potential threat. Every sound could be him waiting in ambush. She moved in short rushes, pausing to scan before advancing, mimicking the same techniques he had used during his approach. The blood trail grew heavier. He was losing fluid, his body weakening with every meter. A shoulder wound was not immediately fatal, but it would slow him, compromise his accuracy, limit his ability to operate his rifle. She was gaining on him. The terrain began to slope upward, the vegetation thinning as she climbed toward a rocky ridge. The ghost was heading for high ground, seeking the advantage that elevation would provide. It was a predictable move, the choice of a sniper who knew that height meant control. She stopped at the base of the ridge and listened. Nothing. The jungle had gone silent, the animals and insects frozen by the violence that had passed through their territory. Even the team's gunfire had ceased, leaving only the whisper of wind through the canopy. He was up there, waiting. Linnea considered her options. A direct approach up the ridge would expose her to fire from above. A flanking maneuver would take time she might not have. Every minute that passed was another minute for him to prepare his position, to bandage his wound, to regain some measure of the lethality that made him so dangerous. She chose the direct approach, not because it was smart, because it was unexpected. The ghost would anticipate caution from an opponent who had already proven herself skilled. He would expect her to take her time, to probe for weaknesses, to wait for daylight and reinforcements. She gave him none of those things. Linnea charged up the ridge, moving in an erratic zigzag pattern, her rifle tucked tight against her shoulder. Rocks slipped beneath her boots. Branches clawed at her face. Her lungs burned with the effort of the climb. His first shot missed by inches, sparking off a boulder to her left. His second was wider, his wounded shoulder throwing off his aim. She kept climbing, closing the distance, turning his precision advantage into a liability. 50 meters. She saw him now, propped against a rock formation at the crest of the ridge, his rifle braced on a ledge of stone. Blood soaked the left side of his jacket. His face was twisted with pain and something else. Respect. 40 meters. He fired again, and this time the round found flesh, punching through the outer edge of her left shoulder and spinning her sideways. She stumbled, nearly fell, and caught herself on a jutting rock. The pain was immediate and enormous, a fire that spread down her arm and across her chest. But she did not stop. 30 meters. The ghost was struggling to work his bolt, his wounded arm failing him. She raised her rifle, fighting through the agony in her shoulder, and placed her crosshairs on his chest. They fired at the same instant. His round went wide, sailing past her head into the darkness below. Hers struck him center mass, driving him backward against the rocks. He slumped sideways, his rifle clattering to the ground, his hands clutching at the wound that was ending his life. Linnea climbed the final meters to his position and stood over him, her rifle aimed at his head. Blood bubbled on his lips as he tried to speak. He managed. You're different. She said nothing. Her finger rested on the trigger, ready to end it if he made any move toward a weapon. The others, he continued, his voice fading. They fight because they are told. You fight because you choose. His eyes found hers in the darkness, and for a moment she saw something that might have been acknowledgement. One killer recognizing another. Then the light went out and the ghost was gone. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the body of the man who had killed 7 Americans, who had terrorized this valley for 8 months, who had nearly killed her twice in the span of a single day. Then she keyed her radio. Vashon to Aldridge. Target eliminated. Confirmed kill. The response came through fuzzy with relief. Copy, Vashon. Outstanding work. What is your status? She looked down at the blood soaking through her uniform, felt the fire in her shoulder, calculated the distance back to the team and the difficulty of the descent. Wounded but mobile, she said. Returning to your position now. She bent down and retrieved the ghost's rifle, a Steyr SSG-69 with a custom scope that had probably cost more than her annual salary. Evidence. Proof that the monster was really dead. Then she began the long walk back to her team, leaving the body of her enemy alone on the ridge where he had made his final stand. Behind her, the first gray light of dawn was beginning to touch the eastern sky. Linnea was halfway down the ridge when she heard the engines. The sound rolled up from the valley floor, a growl of diesel motors and grinding gears that meant only one thing. Bariclas. Multiple vehicles. Coming fast. She pressed her hand against the wound in her shoulder, feeling the warm pulse of blood between her fingers, and forced herself to move faster. The descent was treacherous in the gray pre-dawn light, loose rocks shifting beneath her boots, her injured arms screaming with every jarring step. The radio crackled in her ear. Vashon, we have a problem. Volkov's voice was tight with controlled urgency. She keyed her mic. I hear engines. What are we looking at? Aldridge took over the transmission. Drone feed from battalion shows 4 technicals approaching from the south. Mounted weapons. At least 40 fighters. They must have heard the firefight. 40 fighters. For vehicles with mounted guns. And her team had 2 soldiers who could barely walk, ammunition supplies depleted from the ambush and subsequent engagements, and an extraction helicopter that was still hours away. ETA, she asked. 10 minutes. Maybe less. She reached the base of the ridge and broke into a run, ignoring the fire in her shoulder. The ruins came into view through the trees, the team already repositioning to face the new threat. She could see Volkov directing soldiers to fighting positions along the southern wall, Harmon distributing the last of the machine gun ammunition. Aldridge met her at the perimeter. His eyes went to her shoulder, the blood soaking through her uniform, but he did not comment. Extraction has been moved up, he said. Helicopters are inbound, but they are 20 minutes out. We need to hold until they arrive. 20 minutes against 40 fighters with vehicle-mounted weapons. The math was brutal. Where do you need me? She asked. Aldridge hesitated for only a moment. Southern approach. You are our best shooter, and that is where they're coming from. But Vashon, that shoulder needs attention. After, she moved to the southern wall and settled into a firing position between 2 crumbling sections of mud brick. The view opened onto a gradual slope that descended into the valley, the tree line beginning about 300 meters out. Beyond the trees, she could hear the engines growing louder. Volkov appeared beside her with a field dressing. You are bleeding all over my firing position. She let him bandage the wound while she kept her eyes on the tree line. The dressing was rough and quick, a temporary measure that would slow the blood loss, but nothing more. Proper treatment would have to wait. The first technical burst from the trees, 400 meters out, a battered pickup truck with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed. Two more followed, spreading into an assault line as they raced toward the ruins. Behind them, fighters on foot emerged from the vegetation, rifles raised, voices raised in shouts that carried across the morning air. Linnea placed her crosshairs on the gunner of the lead vehicle. The range was long for a moving target, the angle complicated by the vehicle's speed and the uneven terrain. She tracked his movement, calculated the lead, and squeezed. The gunner slumped over his weapon. The technical swerved as the driver reacted, nearly colliding with the second vehicle before straightening out. Another fighter climbed into the bed to take over the gun. Linnea shot him too. The team opened fire. Rifles cracked along the wall, rounds sparking off the vehicles and cutting down fighters in the open ground. The technicals returned fire, heavy rounds chewing into the mud brick, sending showers of debris across the defenders. Linnea ignored the chaos around her and focused on her scope. She had 13 rounds remaining in her magazine. 13 chances to make a difference before the wave of fighters reached their position. She shot the driver of the second technical through the windshield. The vehicle veered hard right and rolled, spilling fighters into the dirt. She shot two of them before they could regain their feet. The third technical was smarter, hanging back near the tree line while its gunner laid down suppressive fire. She could not get a clean angle on the crew from her position. "Volkov," she called. "Third vehicle, 9 o'clock. I cannot reach him." Volkov shifted his position and opened up with his rifle, forcing the technical to relocate. As it moved, the gunner was briefly exposed. Linnea took the shot. 8 rounds remaining. The fighters on foot had reached the 200-meter mark, using the disabled vehicles as cover while they advanced. There were too many of them. For every one she dropped, 2 more took his place. Aldridge's voice came through the radio. "Helicopters are 15 minutes out. Hold the line." She shot a fighter who was trying to set up an RPG. Then another who broke from cover in a sprint toward the wall. Then a third who was rallying a group for a concentrated push. 5 rounds remaining. The fourth technical made its move, racing forward in a direct assault on the southern wall. The mounted gun blazed, rounds tearing through the ruins, and she heard someone scream behind her. She placed her crosshairs on the driver, but the angle was wrong, the windshield deflecting her shot into the dashboard. The vehicle kept coming. Harmon rose from his position with the team's only remaining rocket launcher. He fired, and the technical exploded in a ball of flame and shrapnel, the force of the blast knocking fighters off their feet and sending debris raining across the slope. For a moment, the assault wavered. The fighters had lost all 4 vehicles and a quarter of their force in the span of 3 minutes. They had expected wounded Americans cowering in the ruins, not a coordinated defense that was cutting them apart. Then a voice rose above the chaos, shouting commands in Pashto, rallying the survivors for another push. Linnea found the source through her scope. A tall man with a radio in one hand and a rifle in the other, standing behind the burning wreckage of the technical, directing his fighters forward. She shot him through the chest. The assault collapsed. Without leadership, without vehicles, without the overwhelming force they had expected to bring to bear, the remaining fighters broke and ran. They fled back toward the tree line, leaving their dead and wounded scattered across the slope. Linnea lowered her rifle and sagged against the wall. Her shoulder was on fire, her hands trembling with exhaustion and blood loss. Around her, the team was checking casualties, redistributing ammunition, preparing for another wave that might or might not come. But for now, they had held. Volkov appeared beside her again, his face streaked with dust and powder residue. How many? She thought about the question. The gunners, the drivers, the fighters in the open, the leader at the end. 14, she said. Today. He nodded slowly, something like awe in his expression. The helicopters will be here in 10 minutes. She looked out at the slope, at the bodies and burning vehicles, at the morning sun rising over the valley. 10 minutes. She could hold for 10 more minutes. She had to. The 10 minutes stretched into an eternity. Linnea remained at her position on the southern wall, scope pressed to her eye, scanning the tree line for any sign of renewed attack. The surviving fighters had regrouped at the edge of the jungle, visible in brief glimpses between the trunks, but they made no move to advance. The carnage on the slope had broken something in them. Behind her, the team worked with grim efficiency. 2 soldiers had taken wounds in the final assault, neither life-threatening, but both painful enough to limit their effectiveness. Brannigan remained unconscious on his stretcher, his breathing shallow but steady. Odia sat propped against a wall, his bandaged leg extended in front of him, a rifle across his lap that he could barely lift. They were broken and bleeding and nearly out of ammunition, but they were alive. The radio crackled with a sound that made Linnea's heart surge. Viper 2-1, inbound your position 2 minutes. Mark your location with smoke. Aldridge responded immediately, his voice cracking with relief. Copy Viper 2-1. Smoke out. A green smoke grenade arced over the wall and landed in the courtyard, billowing emerald clouds into the morning sky. Linnea kept her scope trained on the tree line, watching for any reaction to the approaching helicopters. The fighters in the jungle began to melt away. She caught glimpses of movement as they withdrew, disappearing into the vegetation like water draining into sand. They knew what helicopters meant. Attack aircraft would not be far behind. The thunder of rotors grew from a distant rumble to a deafening roar. 2 Black Hawks swept over the ridge to the north, banking hard as they lined up their approach. Door gunners scanned the terrain, their weapons tracking across the tree line. Linnea finally allowed herself to lower her rifle. The first helicopter touched down in a storm of dust and debris, its crew chief waving frantically for the wounded. Volkov and Harmon lifted Brannigan's stretcher and ran for the open door. Other soldiers helped Odia limp across the courtyard, his arm draped over a teammate's shoulder. The second helicopter circled overhead, providing cover while the first loaded. Aldridge appeared at Linnea's side. Time to go. She nodded but did not move immediately. Her eyes swept the slope one final time, taking in the burning vehicles, the scattered bodies, the evidence of what they had survived. Somewhere out there, on a ridge she could no longer see, the ghost lay dead beneath the open sky. Vashon, Aldridge said, we need to move. She pushed herself upright, fighting the wave of dizziness that came with the movement. The blood loss was catching up to her now, the adrenaline fading, her body demanding payment for the punishment she had forced it to endure. Aldridge caught her arm as she stumbled. I have you. They crossed the courtyard together, ducking beneath the rotors as they approached the helicopter. Hands reached out to pull her aboard, settling her onto the metal floor beside Kerrigan's stretcher. He had been loaded from the first medevac, his wound properly dressed now, his face pale but conscious. He managed a weak smile when he saw her. Heard you had an interesting night. She leaned her head back against the vibrating wall of the aircraft. You could say that. The helicopter lifted off, banking hard as it climbed away from the ruins. Through the open door, Linnea watched the compound shrink below them, the smoke still rising from the courtyard, the slope littered with the remnants of the failed assault. Then they were over the ridge, and the valley disappeared from view. The crew chief knelt beside her and examined her shoulder with practiced hands. Through and through, he shouted over the rotor noise. Missed the bone. You got lucky. Lucky! She almost laughed. She had been shot twice, hunted by a professional killer, ambushed by insurgents, and forced to fight through the night with a team that had started the mission dismissing her as a liability. Lucky was not the word she would have chosen. The flight to forward operating base Bostik took 20 minutes. Linnea spent most of it staring at the ceiling of the helicopter, letting the vibration and noise wash over her, allowing herself to feel the exhaustion she had been holding at bay since the first ambush. Beside her, Volkov leaned close enough to be heard. 23. She turned her head. What? Your confirmed kills. From the first ambush through the final assault. 23 confirmed. Probably more we could not verify. He shook his head slowly. I have been in special forces for 12 years. I have never seen anything like what you did out there. She did not know how to respond. The number felt abstract, disconnected from the reality of what had happened. She had not been counting. She had just been shooting, protecting, surviving. Brannigan, she said. How is he? Volkov glanced toward the stretcher where the master sergeant lay motionless. Stable. He will lose some mobility in that leg, probably in his field career. But he will live. Because of you, a voice said. She looked up to find Aldridge crouching beside them, his hand braced against the helicopter's frame for balance. He made some bad calls out there, Aldridge continued. We all know it. But when the situation fell apart, you held us together. You adapted. You overcame. He held her gaze. I am putting you in for a Bronze Star with Valor Device. Volkov and Harmon are providing witness statements. Linnea felt something shift in her chest. Not pride exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. I was just doing my job, she said. Aldridge smiled. No, you were doing the job Brannigan should have let you do from the start. There's a difference. The helicopter began its descent toward Bostic. Through the open door, she could see the base taking shape below them, the motor pool and the aid station and the rows of tents where soldiers lived and worked and waited for their turn to go outside the wire. Home, at least for now. The skids touched down and medics rushed forward with stretchers and equipment. Linnea waved them off, insisting on walking under her own power despite the protests. She had entered this valley on her feet. She would leave it the same way. As she stepped off the helicopter, she reached into her cargo pocket and touched the cold metal of the ghost scope, removed from his rifle as a trophy, as proof, as a reminder. The monster was dead. Her team was alive. And somewhere, she hoped, her brother was proud. The aid station smelled like antiseptic and copper. Linnea lay on a cot while a surgeon cleaned and sutured the wound in her shoulder, local anesthetic numbing the area enough that she could watch the procedure without flinching. The bullet had passed cleanly through the muscle tissue, missing the bone and major blood vessels by millimeters. Another inch to the right, and she would have lost the use of her arm. Another inch to the left, and she would have bled out on that ridge. The surgeon finished his work and wrapped the shoulder in clean bandages. You will need physical therapy when you get stateside, he said. 6 to 8 weeks before you're back to full strength. No shooting until I clear you. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The reality of what she had survived was beginning to settle in, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. A commotion at the entrance to the aid station drew her attention. Volkov pushed through the canvas flap, his face freshly washed but still showing the exhaustion of the past 36 hours. Brannigan is awake, he said. He's asking for you. Linnea sat up slowly, testing her balance. The surgeon protested, but she waved him off and followed Volkov through the maze of cots and medical equipment to a curtained area at the back of the station. Brannigan lay propped against a pile of pillows, his leg immobilized in a temporary cast, for lines running into both arms. His face was gray and drawn, aged 10 years in a single day. But his eyes were clear when they found hers. Vashon, he said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Sit down. She pulled a folding chair close to his cot and sat, unsure what to expect. This was the man who had dismissed her for 3 weeks, who had relegated her to rear security and gear watching, who had nearly gotten them all killed by refusing to use his best asset. I owe you an apology, Brannigan said. The words hung in the air between them. She waited. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. 8 years ago, I was running an operation in Helmand Province. We had a female interpreter attached to our team. Local national, brave as hell, one of the best we ever worked with. Linnea remained silent, sensing that he needed to tell this story in his own way. We were ambushed, Brannigan continued. Just like yesterday. She took a round in the first volley. I tried to get to her, but the fire was too heavy. By the time we pushed through, she was gone. His eyes opened and found hers again. Something in them had cracked, revealing the wound beneath. I told myself I would never let that happen again. Never put a woman in a position where she could get killed on my watch. He laughed bitterly, the sound catching in his throat. So instead, I nearly got everyone killed by not putting you where you belonged. It was not an excuse. She could see that he knew it was not an excuse. But it was an explanation, and explanations mattered. She took a breath. I lost my brother 3 years ago. An ambush in Paktika province. He never saw the shooter who killed him. Brannigan's expression shifted into understanding. That is why I requested this deployment, she said. Not to prove anything to anyone else. To prove to myself that I could do what he could not. See the threat before it saw me. She paused, and to make sure no one else died the way he did. Silence stretched between them. Two soldiers carrying different wounds, different guilt, different reasons for being in this place at this time. Brannigan reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak but deliberate. You saved my life out there. You saved all of us. I will never dismiss another soldier based on anything other than their capability. You have my word. She squeezed his hand in return. Get some rest, Master Sergeant. We can finish this conversation stateside. He smiled faintly. You're going to make one hell of an operator someday, Vashon. I already am, she said. She left him sleeping and walked out into the afternoon sun. The base was alive with activity, helicopters coming and going, soldiers moving between buildings, the constant hum of a forward operating base at war. Odia was waiting for her outside the aid station, balanced on a pair of crutches, his bandaged leg held carefully off the ground. I wanted to thank you, he said, in the clearing when the ambush started. You covered me, pulled me to safety. I would have died out there if not for you. She remembered the moment. The bullets snapping overhead, the chaos of the initial contact, the young soldier frozen in the open with nowhere to go. She had not thought about it. She had just moved. You would have done the same for me, she said. He shook his head. I do not know if I would have. I froze out there. When the shooting started, I just froze. She studied his face, seeing the shame written there. Then you learn from it, she said. Fear is not weakness. Freezing is not failure. Coming back from it is what matters. You picked up your rifle. You kept fighting. That is what counts. Odia was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened on his crutches, a new resolve in his eyes. Will you teach me? Teach you what? To shoot like you do. To read terrain like you do. To stay calm when everything is falling apart. She considered the request. 3 weeks ago, she had been the outsider, the woman everyone assumed did not belong. Now a young soldier was asking her to mentor him, to pass on the skills that had kept them all alive. The world turns, she thought, and we turn with it. Find me when you are off those crutches, she said. We will start with the basics. Odia's face broke into a grin. Yes, Sergeant. He hobbled away toward the recovery tents, moving with more confidence than he had shown since the ambush. Linnea watched him go, feeling something settle in her chest. This was why she had joined, not for medals or recognition. For moments like this, for the chance to make other soldiers better, stronger, more capable of surviving what the world threw at them. Her brother had believed in that too. And now, finally, she could carry his mission forward without the weight of his death dragging her down. The sun was warm on her face as she walked toward the operations center to begin her after-action report. There would be debriefings and paperwork and the endless bureaucracy of the military machine. But first, she needed to make a phone call. Her mother deserved to know she was alive. 1 week later, Linnea stood before the memorial wall at Forward Operating Base Bostik. The wall was simple. Wooden planks painted white, covered with brass plates bearing the names of soldiers who had died in Kiener Province since the base was established. Some plates were tarnished with age, others still bright with recent loss. Each one represented a life cut short, a family shattered, a future that would never be. Her brother's name was in the middle section. Specialist Marcus Vashon. The date of his death. The unit he had served with. Nothing more. She reached out and touched the letters, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. I did it, she said softly. I found the one who was hunting us. I stopped him. The wind whispered through the base, carrying the distant sound of helicopters and the murmur of soldiers going about their duties. Life continued around her while she stood in this quiet place with the dead. I used to think I came here for you, she continued, to avenge you somehow, or to prove that your death meant something. But that was not really it, was it? She paused, gathering her thoughts. I came here because I was angry. Angry at the randomness of it. Angry that you joined because of me and died because of a war neither of us started. I thought if I could just be good enough, brave enough, skilled enough, I could make sense of what happened to you. A bird called somewhere in the distance. She listened to it fade before speaking again. But there is no making sense of it. You died because war is chaos, and chaos does not care about fairness or meaning. All I can do is keep fighting. Keep protecting the soldiers who are still alive. Keep being the person you believed I could be. She withdrew her hand from the plate and straightened. I'm not going to visit you here again, Marcus. Not because I have forgotten you. Because I am done carrying you as a weight. From now on, I carry you as a strength. She touched the dog tags beneath her uniform one final time, then turned and walked away from the wall. The operations center was busy when she arrived. Aldridge was coordinating with battalion headquarters, finalizing the details of their extraction and the handover of intelligence they had gathered. The information about the compromised ANA element had triggered a major investigation, and several suspected insurgent collaborators had already been detained. Vashon, Aldridge said when he saw her. Got a minute. She followed him to a quiet corner of the tent. He handed her a folder stamped with official markings. Orders came through this morning, he said. You have been officially attached to 7th Special Forces Group as a designated marksman. Permanent assignment, not temporary duty. She opened the folder and scanned the paperwork. The words blurred slightly before she blinked them clear. There is more, Aldridge continued. Command wants to start a pilot program. Female soldiers integrated into special forces operations in combat roles. They want you to help design the training curriculum. She looked up at him. They want me to train other women to do what I do. They want you to train anyone who has the capability, regardless of what is between their legs. He smiled. Your performance out there proved that the old assumptions are wrong. Now we need to institutionalize that lesson before the next generation of leaders forgets it. The weight of the offer settled onto her shoulders. This was bigger than one deployment, one mission, one sniper duel in a jungle valley. This was the chance to change how the military thought about women in combat forever. I will need autonomy, she said. Real input on selection criteria, training standards, everything. Not just my name on a program someone else designs. You will have it. Aldridge extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Vashon. Officially this time. She shook his hand, feeling the calluses of a fellow soldier, the grip of a man who had learned to respect her through fire and blood. The tent flap opened and Volkov ducked inside, followed by Harmon and 2 other members of the team. They gathered around her in a loose circle, faces still showing the marks of combat, eyes bright with something that looked like pride. Heard the news, Volkov said. About time, they made it official. Harmon clapped her on her good shoulder. Drinks are on us when we get stateside. Just try not to outshoot us at the range. Bad for morale. She laughed, the sound surprising her. A week ago, these men had barely spoken to her. Now, they were welcoming her as one of their own. There's one more thing, Aldridge said. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. This was recovered from the ridge where you neutralized the target. Forensics confirmed 47 kills attributed to his rifle over 8 months of operation. 7 Americans, 40 Afghan National Army, and police. He opened the box. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a brass casing. The round she had fired into the ghost's chest. It is not official, Aldridge said. It will never go in any report. But the team wanted you to have it. A reminder of what you accomplished out there. She took the casing and held it in her palm. Such a small thing. A few grams of metal that had ended a monster's reign of terror. Thank you, she said. All of you. The moment stretched, warm and full, before the reality of military life reasserted itself. There were briefings to attend, reports to file, equipment to inventory. The machine ground on regardless of personal triumphs or tragedies. But as Linnea walked out of the operations center into the Afghan sunlight, she felt different. Lighter somehow. The guilt she had carried since Marcus died had not vanished, but it had transformed into something else. Purpose, direction, the knowledge that her skills could protect others from the fate her brother had suffered. She paused at the edge of the base and looked out at the mountains rising in the distance. Somewhere beyond those peaks, the war continued. Other soldiers were fighting and dying in valleys just like the one she had survived. The enemy would regroup, find new leaders, launch new attacks. But they would do so without the ghost. And the next time an American patrol moved through hostile territory, there might be a woman with a rifle watching over them from the high ground, ready to do what needed to be done. If you connected with this story, drop a comment about what resonated most with you. Maybe you have served alongside someone whose skills were overlooked at first. Or perhaps you know what it means to carry the memory of someone you have lost into the work you do every day. We would love to hear your story. The sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Linnea watched until the last light faded, then turned and walked back toward the tents where her team was waiting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new chances to prove that courage knows no gender and skill respects no assumptions. But tonight she would rest. She had earned that much. They all had.